Good morning Year 5 and welcome to day 4 of our application of fractions week. Here are the answers for yesterday. Now while I was doing the answers I did spot a mistake in one of the questions, which you almost certainly spotted while you were doing them as well. So there's your answers for the first page. And it was this one. Look, the questions were the wrong way round. So please don't worry about that one if you didn't work that one out. Page 2 and then page 3. Okay, so now is going to be today's Fluent in 5. So pause your screen and give yourselves 5 minutes. And here are today's answers. Okay, today we're looking at the relationship between fractions and decimals. So what I've got here is just a recap really. We have touched on this a few times, but I am going to go over it with you. So if you think about 7/10, we've been talking about fractions. So we'd write 7/10 like this, 7 parts out of 10 equal parts. We could also write some equivalent fractions. We know how to do that. If we do the same to the top and the bottom, we multiply by 10 or divide. So we could have lots of fractions which equal 7/10. They don't all have to look like that. We could draw it, 7 parts out of 10. It's supposed to be equal. My picture isn't very equal, but 7 parts out of 10 equal parts. 7 stars, 7 green stars out of 10 stars altogether, there is another way of doing it. And this is another way of writing 7/10, because if we look at a place value grid, I'm just going to put one there for you, we know that we've got hundreds, tens and ones, and of course we know that they keep going that way as well. But the next column after ones is tenths. 10 tenths makes a whole one, 10 ones makes a 10, 10 tens makes 100, and so on. That's how our place value grid works. So we could write 7/10 as 0.7. Remember our decimal point, excuse me, our decimal point is the division between the whole numbers and the parts of numbers, or the fractions. So fractions and decimals really are the same thing, just written in a slightly different way. So that being the case then, we could write a few fractions straight onto a place value grid. We could write, for example, 4/10 would be 0.4. 8/10 would be 0.8. If we had 48/10, that would be 4 whole ones, add 8/10. So sometimes we can transfer them straight on, which is fine if we're talking about tenths or hundredths, because hundredths, of course, are our next column. So if we had 7 hundredths, we could write it as 7/100, or we could write 0.07, and so on. So when we're changing between fractions and decimals, what we really need to happen is we need our denominator to be 10 or 100, and that's how we can work it out. So now we're going to try to make some fractions into decimals. We'll start with the fraction 2/5. So it isn't nicely in tenths already for us, but we need to make it so that it is. Now we know to make it into tenths, we need a denominator of 10, and we know that to get from 5 to 10, we multiply by 2. Therefore, we do the same to the top as we do to the bottom. Now, if you can't remember why this works, please do go back to previous week's videos and have a little look. Now, we've got 4/10, which is 0 ones and 4/10. Now, it's nicely in tenths for us. So 2/5 isn't anything, there's no 2s or 5s in it. 2/5 is 0.4, okay? Because we've turned it into tenths as a fraction, and then if we say 4/10, that's how we write that as a decimal. Okay, what about this one then? 17/20. Right, we could change it so that our denominator is 10, but to make 20 into 10, I need to half it. And if I half 17, I end up with a decimal. Now, you can't have a decimal in a fraction. So instead of 10, I'm going to go for 100 as my denominator. 20 times 5 is 100. 17 times 5 is 85. So 17/20 is the same as 0.85. 80 of those hundredths is 8 tens, and 5 hundredths is 5 hundredths. Okay, Let's do another one. 28/40. Okay, so 28/40. I'm going to try a denominator of 10. I divide by 4. Do the same to the numerator to give me 7/10. So 28/40 is 0.7. Okay, and then we'll do another one. Let's do 3/4. So 3/4. Again, I'm not going to do 10 because 4 is not a factor of 10. I'm going to go to 100. And 4 times 25 is 100. And 3 times 25 is 75. So 3/4 is the same as 0.75. And that's one of the ones that you really should recognise straight away. 1/4 is 0.25. I'm just going to write these down for you. And a half is 0.5 because 1/2 is equivalent to 5/10. And then 3/4 is 0.75. Okay, so that's a little bit of the knowledge there. So hopefully that's rung some bells and you've remembered a little bit about it. We're going to go through some examples together now. So let's do this one first. Amina is shopping. She says, I would like to buy 1/4 kilogram of cheese. We need to write 1/4 on the scales as a decimal. Now, as I said, this is one of those ones that hopefully you just know. But if you didn't, you would want to get it so that it was 10 or 100 as the denominator. And then change it into a decimal from there. Okay, so the answer to that one is 0.25 kilograms. Next one. So Adam says 0.25 is smaller than 2/5. Explain why he is correct. Well, there's two things we can do here. Whenever you're comparing numbers, it's much easier if they're the same type. At the moment we have a decimal and a fraction. It would be much easier if they were both decimals or both fractions, and either one is fine. So let's do it by changing them both into decimals. So that one's already a decimal. Let's change 2/5. So 2/5, let's make it so it has a denominator of 10. So it's 4/10. So 2/5 is 0.4. So this number is 0.4 and we're comparing it to 0.25. So you can see that 0.25 is smaller because it only has 2/10, whereas this number has 4/10. Okay, which number is the greater one in each of those boxes? Again, anytime you're faced with a problem where it would be easier to have the same thing, just change it so that it is. So 1.5 and 1.2. Well, 1.5, if you remember, a half is 0.5, so that's 1.5. That's a whole one, and then a quarter is 25 hundredths, so that's 1.25. 1 and 5 hundredths, remember if it's just hundredths, there's 0/10. And 1 and 3/5 is the same as 1 and 6/10. Okay, so then we can go and say which is bigger. Well, this one is bigger because 1.5 has got 5/10, that's only got 2. This number's got 2/10, that one's got 3, so that's bigger. 0/10 and 4/10, 6/10 and 5/10. Okay. And this last one, so we're matching our decimals with fractions now. So 0.25 is going to be, again, try and get them so they're the same. And if you can start spotting patterns, then all the better. So 25 hundredths is 1/4. 0.4 is 4/10. Now 4/10 isn't here, so one of these must be equivalent. Well, it can't be 2/10 because 2/10 can't be the same as 4/10, but we could simplify 4/10 to 2/5. And 0.2 is 2/10. Okay, so your task today is to solve some similar problems. It's a few sheets again, so I will put stills on at the end of the video of each of the sheets, and then I'll come back tomorrow with your answers.